understand how to communicate the systems through the avatar lines and get out of provision lines at 3 lines of volume. Now, process communication of 3 lines of directions and division lines of space and time. Now, space and time is provision lines how we see our set track locations. Very powerful when we come in position location food systems. Everything that we do is a line signal, but remember, it's already done through its position. So the avatar has to truly understand how to create through its holographic imaging of itself. Starting with the grounds, the powers, and the atmospheres, right? Understand your engineering skills, how to use it through your calculate and modify into your infrastructure, your set positions, all through the engineering tools that you have, set lines. Okay, so and how to use a ruler. Okay, through holographic lines or lens or communicates sending and griddings. Electrical screens, electrical grounds, it's all through imagination, right? But the avatar has to live what it's always lived in, is a concept of living in that position. Okay? So you guys have your test tomorrow, which is already done through its equations. So it's all identifying how to understand the ground lines. Okay, so let's get into box frame settings and travel. Basic interpretations. Okay, so we're going to start with the basics, A, get into B. We're just going to start with the alphabetical line, all right? C, break it down. What you set positions. This is all in calculate modify through its ruler attractions, A, B, C, D, E, all right? That's its ruler, okay? Just basic settings. We're not going to go through zeros and ones because you don't identify the set position and ground sending surface. Process lines is the box frame. So let's just go through the box frame and set position lines. Sending track centers and direct signals. So you guys are going to go to your moons and position location in the line calculate and modify, your line course center line communication system, understand how to come into your own CGI, your own green screen, how to set up and line position your schematics, how to understand how to use it through its holographic imaging, through its holographic gridding, and set design. All right, so let's set A line track centers of here, A set lines, okay? And B is going to set over line, rotation line calcs centers of D over factors over set solar sail. And C is going to be A lines equals lines of C. That puts lines of question over screen, direct lines of grounds. All right, so I'm just giving you guys to understand how to use it through a ruler, through an alphabetical setting and stream adaptation system. But you work with the chronological order A, B, C, D, and E. Let's start with attractions and direct signals. All right, so once we understand that, we go from line centers at all positions of D, set lines of travels, over cross lines of D equals lines of C. Okay, C lines equals lines of question and travel, and that communication lines of grounds. And then we come to E factors over lines. Question lines of E equals lines of E equals lines of C over C, right? Basic ground communications, right? Then we come into the platforms, the 3 centers of travel. With me so far? All right, so that's a wall sequence in position of outer frame. That's an outer frame, okay? But you can see the inner frame. You see that? You see the outer frame of structure, then you see the inner frame, okay, which is its road, all right? So that's just to basically understand how to use it in highway and travel communications, right? So understand how to use an alphabetical system, a ruler, everything through A, B, C, and D, adds its equation through its question. So it modifies the systems how you see the connections to the outer force to the inner force. The inner force is already done. It's the outer force you have to get in provisions of. The inner force is the simulation of the map. Now, once you modify that, you understand it through a graph that puts all communication system off the attractions. All right, so we start with that setting. Okay, that's set up. Now, we set the position location. So A, we're going to set up a location grid. A equals lines of settings. E equals lines of C. That process calculations in confirmation, right? Location grid. Setting high centers, then we get into D factors, setting screen adaptation to the flux over settings and platforms over its track location. All right, now we have a walking signal. We have to use A, B, C, D, and E all at once and travel. That process communicates in setting a flux over across the line connection setting cancels out, delete, and default. Setting platforms of settings and travels in cerebral cortex is set design. Travels in point line track locations. So add another box frame in rotation lines of ground. Center calculates a setting. A, B, C equals lines of E, F, A. Set lines of travel. So I'm adding lines of equations of framing in direct location holographic grid. Process line, set your course centers, directing ground centers of clocking and set tractions. Holographic setting. All through done. That's A, B, C, D, E. Okay, inside out. All right, so then you can get into all levels. You start with the alphabetical system. You go through letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols, right? So we'll do it again. Okay, and this is all through the ruler. Start with the ruler here, and then we can start with a ruler here, and a ruler here. 4 rulers in one, all right? So let's get into A, B, and C, D. This is how you set up a hologram line position over a cross line. So E/F, right? F screens, cross lines at A centers, B over lines at track centers, C over set positions, D over line positions, E over track centers, and F over foundation, all through traction, right? Change formation lines at grounds in Schumann resonance. There's a graph screen adaptation. Schumann resonance, okay? Now, getting that high centers line calculated setting, A fluxes over C, C takes over D, D over lines of setting, factors over A in travel communications. All right? Now, what you have to understand is how to set up all positions in this constellation system all through tractions. Now, directing line centers, you can add 4 divots on a ruler, add another 4 divots on the center of a ruler, and set positions at all levels and travel in that communication system all through tractions. The divots of a ruler, right? Okay, so when you get more of your imagination system, you can calculate and modify how you want to see that. Nav position lines of travels change all communication of schematics over lines of primer and primer. Process communicates setting and traction. Now, directing that signals, location and systems all through settings, all through set position of calculations, right? So the divots are here, right? So we're going to ground the systems, 1, 2, factors over 3, over 4, over 5, over 6 lines of setting. Process indicates lines over cross lines indicate the position of 1, 2, 3 over set location of travel. Directing ground centers coming into the pyramids, right? Process indicates lines of 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of platforms, directing over cross line, condition lines of 6 over 8 over travel and that communication system. All through traction, there's your pyramid. All right, setting lines of sequence, ground centers of 1, process over 2, 3, set lines, 12, position of 14, center lines of 16 over 20. Directing platforms and set calculation setting. Ground centers of service, process lines of 1, 2, 3 lines of 4 platforms over line. Directing ground centers over cross line conditions, crossing over lines of highways and track communication system and 4 set positions. Operation lines of sequence. Ground centered line communication in the same direct signals in the opposite location setting and position lines of its void crosses the angles of center point communication system all through set tractions. All done through equation. All right? So if you truly understand how to use a ruler, you understand how to use the metric meters and scales. Cases set in millimeters, millimeters of factors, millimeters of scale. We don't use that in a 3-dimensional line. A ruler has a 3-dimensional line. We don't live in a 3-dimensional line. We live in all dimensional lines of space and time. And it's all connected to how you see your alphabetical system, your letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols through a ruler. So I'm just trying to get the team to understand how to use that. Okay, track position lines of setting. Now you see the inner course, outer course lines, and here's your mapping system inside traction. There's your map. Okay? So you don't bring anything in. You just observe what you've done. If you bring in a frame, the XE1000 comes in. Right? So until you identify your map, you have to understand the inner force to understand the outer force lines, setting, location, setting of structure of design. Okay? Just show you 4 lines of flux over setting. How it syncs lines of communication line with grounds, panels, and atmospheres. All right, so we start lines of provision. Now we change the rulers of course. Calculates and modifies how we see the sequence lines of grounds now. So it gets more line complicated into an open window frame. Okay, panels of 3, inset lines of flux. Inside and outside, right? And then you come this way and this lines of tractions. Okay, so you got the grounds, you got the panels, and you got the ceilings. Okay, let's start with the basics. So you see inside, outside now, right? But look, you're seeing outside, inside too, at the same time. Same scale, same measure, same balance, same traction, same division, same locations, right? So in that position, if you look really close, you can see above, see below at the same time. Right? So let's change that provision. Right? Let's change the primers and set lines of sequence of highway. Okay, so now you're seeing a door. Right? Let's change course centers lines of time measure, change the line signals in lines of equal lines, equation lines of pi. Right? And then we process communications. Now we have the ruler and we're using the alphabetical system, but now we're going to change the course centers of time. So we're at AB equals lines of C. C equals lines of triangulation. And that's what we're going to do box frame, set lines of Y screen into flux. Okay, so that's going to be set up through this. And then you set up another ruler on the ground centers and location setting through letters. L lines, we got to C positions and travels to D. E factors, F over screen, and line conditions of G. Okay, 2 rulers and set lines of calculations, right? All right, so we line signal the systems. Now we do it through track locations, right? 2 provision lines of L, process lines of L equals lines of D. Okay, so D lines of C, E equals factors, C lines of calculation screens, F lines charge, directing lines of ground center of service, opens all panels of communication system off their traction. Okay, so it's very powerful how you set that up in line positions. So we take the A tracks, B lines, it's already in C lines of core centers, directing lines of equal lines equations, directing communication lines of conversions, setting lines of equal lines of panels, process lines of indication, setting outline, inline, and setting lines of travel, triangulation of flux, adding a triangulation inside rotation in its pyramid travel. Okay, inside line, outside line connects to Earth. See, there's a triangle. There's a pyramid inside the Earth. All right, so we have a box frame. We outline the signals in rotation, sending a set location to a system off the tractions, right? And then we add a Y screen to a flux. Now, 3 lines of centers, process communication system, all out. Set a coil resistor to a spring that time sending the sequence. Sets travels in point communications. Directing ground centers, high lines of sequence and position lines of panel. Okay? So you see it in all ways and forms inside the mapping system. Okay? So you know different angles, different points, different graphs, different communications. All through set operation. Right? So remember, everything in that position of inside is already done. It's your map. So don't touch the map until you understand the frequencies of yourself. Everything's created through its holographic structure as set calculation setting off the set position. Okay? It's already done through its equation. You just have to identify how to use a ruler through alphabetical lines, letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. Okay? Okay. Now we're going to work in set lines position its open window frame, main frame, track frame, communication lines, correlation lines, and travel frames. In that position location its system, now you can change the rulers into higher frequencies of platforms. 3 centers of travels, indirect lines of grounds, and set tractions. Okay? Higher long communications. So we cross the angles, and remember, you're changing the perimeters of time. Okay? Cross the angles of 1, process lines of 2, process lines of 3, process lines of 4, process lines of 5, and set traction. Very complicated stuff, but it's a very powerful drawing. Setting panels, so there's electrical fence and communication, directing ground centers of surface. Now the process indicates setting this portal on lines of system all through tractions, off the direction, right? Calculating modify inside, XC1000 comes out through platform of center operation screen and direct signals of grounds and set tractions. Now directing ground centers is the line screen adaptation system of the set position of Skynet. Skynet line core centers directing lines of 1 platforms over C factors over setting and process communications. So it's really understand the information lines, how you connect the dots. And once you understand the platforms, then you understand how to set position locations, holographic gridding, and set position of its ruler. Directing ground centers, crossing angles and point lines, communication lines of 2 X lines of screen. Directing ground centers, high lines of sequence, and F line charge and communication lines of screen. Process lines of indication system. There's the track locations. There's your map inside contraction. That's your map. Right? All you're doing is just observing what you've already done through this equation. Okay? So, get in that position locations and setting. Now this is where you bring in your planets. Planets come in sequence and panel communication. 3 planets in setting, right? Color it the line centers. Operation line sequence. Jupiter is red because it's in frequency lines of grounds. Pluto is blue. It's set position, right? And they would coordinate line communication lines. Mercury is green in set tractions. Okay, so I'm adding frames now. Set lines of sequence and set lines. XC1000 comes in. Location sending a travel. See what you're doing. Comes here, here, and 3 centers of travel, right? So it knows exactly what's going on. So it doesn't pick it up because you're already in allocate time frame. Change communication and mapping panel, process the indication system, all 3 calculations. There's your planets in balance. Okay? And you're seeing the provision lines onto its chessboard. Direct the lines of holographic line screens, adaptation and setting through flux. Process the indication system, change time scales, center off, center position, center calculation setting, split lines anomaly, 3 lines travels, direct lines of highways and travel, and that communication lines of grounds. Sets calculates line screen, adaptation and flux over screen. Sets communication system, change the angles of point lines of graph and planetary line centers of time, measure, and scale. Process the indication system of the calculation setting. In that line rotations, it's all through the line position locations, how you see the information system, all through tractions. Okay? Your planetary settings. Your 3 planets, right? Okay. And so it's basically understanding the structures of grounds, right? How that's all set up, right? And basically, you're here in some positions. It's already there in traction. That's you. Looking at everything you've done into a box frame of a window frame of a simulator. Okay? Very powerful stuff, guys. All right? So it's observing on 3 channels of our operation, 3 sequence in real-time measure and scale. Looking at all directions, set positions. Now, once it walks in the system, it creates its platforms. E factors are setting, travels in point to graph communications. Now, it creates its door, center calculation setting, and operation line setting, and rotation surface and travel. Okay? So as it goes in, it's seeing everything that is in position, runs the system through operation. Okay? Then you change the communication time measure, sets course centers of time calculation. Process the indication lines and C lanes, lines of rotation, lines of surface attractions. Right? But your planetary system doesn't leave. All you do is copy and paste it. Now you guys be able to do that and set position lines of tomorrow, lines of sequence, because you're going to be 24 lines of alignments and locations set and simulated that sets the coordinates of communication longitude and latitude you're streaming and set position of seconds, minutes, and hours. Okay, so processing line centers, you can add another tubing, crossing inline rotations in set lines of course centers of travel, setting lines of platforms and set lines of 3 centers of travel communications and directions, right? Time measure and scale, process indication system, all through travel, all calculation lines, holographic city set design, boom. And you're looking in set position. There's your city. So as you create your city, you're creating everything from a line that creates everything from inline. The inline is already created in structure of design. And there's your planets. Okay, now you can add planets, but you got to be careful what you're doing through structure and set position locations. But that's you walking the system now into the portal of communication. See? Creating the story. See, it's walking, it's going to go through here, right? So it's here in that position. Now it's here in tractions. Goes through the portal and 3 centers, over line, cross line, in that line, communication to its door and direct locations. All right, from here to here to here. Look at that, boom. Teleportation, vortex lines. Vortex stream, over cross line connection setting in shadow waves. That's a shadow wave. Direct line signals over cross line connection setting to another shadow wave from direct lines of signals. Process the indication setting, all 3 flux, all the set position, location, and travel. Booyah. That's my equation. Okay? So always see your mapping system inside tractions. Okay, know exactly where you are in that communications, all time, all frame, all set traction. All through a simulator, guys. Okay, very powerful stuff. Okay, so you start with the rulers. Now you can change the metric meters to scale. You can change the yards, the central settings to its circuits, process its communication system of the setting. Now in that communication system, where you, in that position line, is track in that coordinate centers, puts lines of timelines of settings. Okay, so let's get the arrows of indication. Let's track the centers, locations, and settings. Okay, let's go through this location, and there's the arrow. Okay. All right, so you got to understand your box frame. Let's start with the box frame, right? Now you indicate the platforms that you're setting up in travel. Okay. Now, once you get in that position, you have triangulation up and triangulation setting across locations. There's the house. Now you want to add the house, there's the set position, right? One side line tractions, there's the other line position location of the system, right? Oh yeah, that disappeared. Okay, all right, and that position's here, 3 platforms in position of 4, cross angles, up line swing, line screen adaptations of flux over setting. Okay, so that's 2 pyramids in 1 cycle. Then we have another pyramid and 3 lines of set lines of travel, process in system of these tractions. Knowing how to set these things up in travel, guys, it's very simple. The set lines of flux, 3 grounds of settings, process lines of platforms over set locations. So it's 3 line core centers, different lines of communication system of the tractions. Directing lines of signals, crosses the angles. Signal lines of 1, cross lines of triangulation lines of flux over 2. Sets communication lines of grounds, line signals, process the indication system of the tractions. Okay? Very complicated stuff. Okay, so we indicate the ruler. There's the ruler, right? So we go through 8 tracks, and we set a B line into a C line rotation, and we divert location setting a question over mark, triangulation and position lines of box, flux over screen of center of our operation sequence. So we correlate the settings of mapping lines, the process communication lines of directions of a mapping line center. Process the indication setting, process line course centers and perimeters. Now the parameters sets course centers of 3 lines of signals and track in that communication operation of the sequence. Cross lines of 1, 2, 3, and 4 line communications, all through map, right? Road, graph, screens, direct location system. But everything inside is the structure of its map that's already done, okay? So just trying to get you guys how to set up its own system and set position lines of travel and track location, okay? So it's getting a lot more complicated now, right? Try to understand how to set it up in set position, how to see yourself inside and outside to its holographic simulator of simulation. Okay, very powerful stuff. All right, so 3 lines of moons, directing course centers, lines of travel, direct lines of providing. Moon providers are giving you lines of course centers, moderation lines, computer lines of frames. Tracking in that rotation system and passwords, directing key codes, key frames, key calculation lines, screen adaptations. Cross lines of indicates settings, no graph interference, 4 lines of signals, and set communications, right? Directing grounds of settings, process lines of indicates the system, all through programming, 3 centers of travel, 3 ground centers, line conditions, setting, and process communication, right? Directing ground centers and computer framing, process lines of indicates the system, all through setting, flash drive, box frames, inline rotation, line conditions at ground centers, surface interactions, demo equation, right? All right, so you guys are already calculated on your moons. Now you get instruction lines, design lines, how to use your position, your wall sequence, lines of communication, lines of travel. Process indication lines at high centers, set lines, inline, outline, rotation center, and travel communications. Directing ground centers, the structure of the building and set traction. Okay, other sign lines, that's where it comes in oppositions, right? Process indicates setting, all through travel. Okay, your pyramid, always working with pyramids, guys. Always pyramids, always pyramids, always pyramids in platform, right? So you bring it in, there's your map, there's your system, location, setting. Okay, all you're seeing is what you already know in set position with structure of the design line. Okay, so you simplify things, everything through travel, right? And know exactly how to convert that into a line centers into a simulation locations. See how powerful that is, all through structure, all through design, right? So your planetary lines are inside the alignments, inside of you interactions, right? It's provision lines that you already know you're inside. Now you understand the outside. The inside is the map, the outside is provision and void. Now it gets a lot more easier when you understand how to use a ruler in that position of its travel. That crosses lines of all communication system, inside rotation system, all through Skynet. Okay? All through tractions, all their location, setting, and travel. Okay? Got the doors and signal. Right? So you start to see a lot more in division lines of lines and how to set it in holographic imaging, location of system, all through gridding. Okay, so let's have an error indication system and 4 centers of sequence, northwest, south, and east. All right? So you got a ruler here, a ruler here, a ruler here, and a ruler here. Rulers help you out, right? They get you a lot more understanding how to use that through flux, okay? Through operation, through set position, through calculations and modifications, all right? All right, so once you set that up, line signals, it's just connecting the dots, connect to the lines, it's set lines and settings. Process indicates the system, all through travel of recognition, okay? All right, got center operates, lines of sequence, story direction, time frame, set course lines of clocking, and 4 lines of scale of communication, okay? Sending direct signals, there's your map, inside travel, okay? I'm showing you inside because it's already done through structure. All your codification is already done. Everything you've done through encryption, everything you've done through binary, it's already done the avatars. So the avatar has standard sequence of panels and position lines of 3 lines of flux and 1 line centers a half pipe. Process indication lines security, process lines direct signal location of a system all through travel. Okay, in directions into its pyramid and travel communications. You're always in your pyramids, never leaving your pyramids. Pyramids are the imagination that puts you in lines of recourse and direct and read line communication, sending and travel. Process indication system, inside rotation to a system through Skynet. Calculate and modify inline rotation of cycles and travel in that communication planetary system. Right? So again, you're seeing yourself outside, looking inside and travel. Okay? And once you get in that position, now you create the platforms. How you want to create the platforms is all set in location. Okay? Tube centers, vortex line, inside rotation. In setting and operation sequence. So you're going from there, now you're inside, right? Inside over here, planetary 1, planetary 3, and planetary 6 in track communications. Now you see everything in mapping sequence inside rotation. Okay? But it's very powerful how you see yourself, creating it through a simulator. Okay? So that's it. That's basically understanding how to set that up in locations, guys. It's very powerful stuff, how you get into higher lines of sequence and location of system through holographic gridding, through imaging, right? That process lines of the rulers. Now you can change the rulers to metric meters and scale, and you can change the position location of the system, but it's all through imagination. And remember, your avatar's already done this. It's a lot more easier to understand that in interactions. All right, so let's get into spacebox frames. Now, spacebox frames are very complicated because you have to understand provision lines of setting the balance, direct and redirect and setting the signal. Okay? Now, the process indicates the system is to understand how to use the platforms. Okay, scaling through one center of travel. Let's get in that positions, in 2 positions, in 3 centers of travel, into 1 set traction. Okay? So that process lines of 1 and process lines of 2 in setting. Okay? Change the platforms and set lines of course sends E factors over screen. Look at that, disappeared. Vibrations too high in factor. Okay, and then we factor in the division lines of 1 platform that separates the calculation screen line. Okay, so that's position lines of 1. Okay, and then we cross the angles and settings of 3 tractions over line communication. Right, and then we indicate the platform and settings into rotation spin. 3 centers of operation screen and adaptation of system through its coil. So that's calculation lines of grounds and high lines of sequence, all through tractions, all through locations, all through setting. Okay. All right, so we go in electrical line grids, process lines of 1 over 2 over 3, set lines of 1 over 2 over 6 over 9, and set travel. Okay. So as we go through electrical line grounds, it sets lines of provisions of walking line centers in that rotation to its graph that sets up the position of the location system off the calculations. Directing in lines, you go 45 line angles, 3 centers of travel, 6 lines of measure, and scales of communication system as surface. Process indication setting, there's your mapping system in travel, in site traction, right? Which is already done through its equation. Okay? Already done through its equation. Okay? Already done through its equation. Okay? All through signal, all through modification. All right? Look at this in set positions. Okay? Pixelations. So, see the pixelations. Pixelations, everything. And once we understand the pixelations, then we can add equations. Change the graph, change the streams, change the directions, the locations. Right? Add in red. Now let's add line positions of blue. Overlines the panel, traffic communications. Right? Let's add positions all levels. Let's add white. Overlap and sequence lines of grounds. Okay, and let's add green. Let's add traffic communications. Okay, bring it out. See what you've done in location. Okay, marking centers, marking screen adaptations of flux. Okay, inside, outside line connections over lines of sequence, location system, all through setting to pixelation graphs. Okay, then you see the face come in. See the face, 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 face. Right? Everything has a face. So everything you see has set location system and pixelation lines in holographic gridding. So your pixelation, your particles, your separations comes in line connect setting, your subparticles, your subtronic lines, projecting lines of sequence comes in all coloration lines of pattern. All the colors lines of settings. Right? Process and that is all through structure of design line. Right? Very powerful stuff, right? How everything's created through structure and a holographic gridding. Okay. So I just want you to understand where you're mostly understanding more levels of you from inside line. And instead of location lines of outside line, you got to get provisions of instead of track location setting and set position. Okay. So I'm just showing you so many ways of looking at that through a particle stream. And understand that through its indication system, all through holographic setting, through a simulator. Now you start here and you see yourself and set what you set up in your seconds, minutes, and hours. Now you got your 24 clock in line. The process indication lines of platforms. And so it's all like this location started cubing. Now I can use 1 box frame into 1 ruler and 1 side setting. but it processes lines of the ceiling, and it processes lines of the panels, and it processes lines of the grounds right away. So I don't need to use 4 rulers. I can only use 1. But I have the cross angles and split lines of communications and setting. Cross indication cross lines of timelines of setting. Cross indication lines of platforms or line communication lines of setting. Cross indicates the setting of flux. Cross lines of 2, 3, 6 lines of measure and scale. Okay? Now it indicates the platforms and set lines of E factors over set tractions. Directing ground centers, online signal, offline position location, measure, and scale. Sets communication, online sending, offline communication lines of scale. Into stargates and portal communication. Okay? Now you go outline centers in rotation, surface, and travel. And set calculations. All right, going beyond the system. Then you come out of line setting location and setting through box frame. Cross line indicate lines of high position locations inside travel communications. Inside settings, change information system, off through towers of communication. 2 structures of buildings on both sides. Setting position here, setting position here, 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 and here. All through flux, all through triangles, all through set calculation. There's the structure of the building. All right. X8000 comes in, docks the system with center operation. Okay. Now, change the time frame goes inside the position of this building, restructure the system outside tractions in the location system and travel. Okay. And you see it from inside location. There's your map inside travel. Okay. And you see the X8000s about the system, about the structure of the building. So you can see it on all different platforms too in travel. It's very powerful. You see that in different angles. But you have to understand the perspective, how you see it, location of hologram, right? Inside and outside of everything. That identifies the echo Zulers in that position of X-ray 1, Fox line, high centers of travel. Okay? Change information lines of grounds, change the platforms. 4 signals and ground centers, 45 flux on different angles. There's the structure, there's the grounds. Okay, setting sequence, there's the ceiling and line position location of travel. Okay, so there's always ways, guys, to look at this in all structure of design. Okay, so many ways you can do this. You can do it at all different angles, but it's different rules, different rulers of communication and directions. See it from this angle, there's the structure, there's your Skynet. Okay, and again, you set your planetary alignments. Let's set up 4 position lines of planets. Okay, and again, you're in position location here. Look at what you've done already in setting. That's you at the bottom. And you're just looking at it, observing it, right? You don't like it, you fix it. And remember, you set up the time sequence of time. Now that clocks the system how you guys use that in a 24 scale in position lines of setting. Now understand how to use that is permission lines of grounds and high calculation system all through time and scale. All through setting, all through operation, all right? Now, in that position locations, we have to truly understand how this converts the system of its planetary alignments. But it's really going to understand how to basically see from inside and outside in setting. Anything triangulation, anything through box, setting lines of box, inside and outline, right? Overlapping sequence, right? So the more you overlap, the more you see inside travel. So you see inside and outside at the same time, right? And then once you get in that position, you can set the volume, but you need your rulers. Rulers sets the tone and set position relation graphs, right? You can set lines of A, set position lines of B, set lines of C, and you can do a 4-line signal in line connections of F and travel communications. That's 4 rulers in 1, setting the platforms over C over factors, directing ground centers, high signal locations, all through travel, inside location and setting. Everything outside is inside, because it's already inside. Everything's outside, inside now. You're not here to understand inside. You're here to identify outside, which is the void. Void centers of 1 over factors over 2. Factors over 3 is a line counter setting that comes in a location grid over set lines of communication. Directing ground centers an inline rotation outside travel in that communication setting surface. Process indication settings, tunnels 1, 2, 3, and 4 set travel communication. All through direction. Okay? Now you're seeing inside and outside at the same time. Right? Change the grounds of high lines of surface and travel. Change the operation lines of sequence of holographic line stream location lines of travel. Okay? So you see it on all different angles in travel communications all at once. Okay? So that's why you have the rulers. Rulers basically set everything in light metaphor. Now, correlating setting, it gets a lot more complicated when you come into your webbing system of travel. It's very complicated because now you come to locations, megahertz, megawatts, communication lines of grounds, frequencies, settings, and line communication system of travel, right? flux over 1, flux over 2, runways, system location, echo lines, and screen adaptations of flux. Okay, road graph cross lines, 1 over signal, 1 over traction, 1 divisions, 1 location, electrical lines of fencing, process of indication system and calculations. Directing ground centers, high lines of 1, 2, 3, and 4, 6, and 8 lines of travel communications. Directing ground center of service, process the indicate and high center location and setting through structure of design line. Your indications here, in set location setting, says measure scales, and 3 sets of rulers and rotation system all through travel. Okay. Energetic waves, structure line, division lines, high signal location system attraction. Okay, so it's about understanding how to ground the system as center lines, processing indication lines as center operation lines, and rotation line, server location and galaxy communication lines as surface and locations. Directing ground centers, operation line sequence in platforms and communication system inside traction. Okay? So, like I said, it's to understand how to set up everything through a hologram, guys. It's very simple to do these things because you outline your systems off the structure, off the design. Right? See everything from outside now because it's already structured inside. That's the process how we come into yin and yang. Right? Yin is already set up, yang is already set up. So there's no conversion to communication and conversion setting anything through separation. If you go to star makers lines, that's already set up. You get a box frame line communications, that's set up. You get a circle line communications, you get a doorway with time frame, you get a house line core centers. Everything that position location system is already set up through hologram. So it's the basic grounds and set position lines of travel. Okay? Know exactly how to set that line, communication lines of pyramid through travel. But you're always in the process of seeing yourself in observation system, all through traction, all through locations, all through travel. And that communication system into your planetary line. Start here and see this. Outside, inside line. But the inside is already done through this equation. You're just seeing it through location of its map. Okay, that you set up. So the more you identify that, you understand what you're doing. Okay, how you see everything through a simulator. Box, window frame of triangulation, anything in line conditions. So it's easy to understand this, but it's hard to understand this from inside outside. You don't need to identify the in. It's identifying the out of everything. So outline box, 3 signals, lines, and grounds. Okay? Processing that is overriding the sequence that processes indication system outside setting to inside. See, now it's outside, inside now, right? Because I'm overlapping, right? I'm processing the location of the system and travel. Okay? Then I'm indicating the system inside line condition, inside the rotation system of travel. Okay? Setting lines of signals of 1, process lines of 2, process lines of 3, and travel communications. Right? Different angles, different points, different graph, different communications of roads, and travel communications. So it's all indicated, and it gets more complicated because you have the cross angles now. It's more like Doctor Strange, so you set up laser track centers of grids and line communications of panels that override the system location of its windows that overlines the set location system while through travel. Okay, outline setting, inside rotation, and graph communications. Outside, inside, right? There we go again. Outside, inside, right? Inside, inside, inside. Okay, so I start here, here, and here. And set travel communications. Okay. All right, so you go from this angle into this angle. There's the doors. And setting the sequence of panel communication. So, if we get a true understand how to do this, then it's much easier to understand this in travel. There's another structure of a building, right? See it on 3 different angles, 4 lines of travels, and point lines of graph and set traction. Okay, and then we get division lines of cycles, over cross lines, and that lines. All you have to do is understand how to lace the lines of communications holographic gridding. Process indication setting of flux, ground centers of surface, and track communications. Structure division, location setting of center. Change communication lines, wall sequence of panels of communications. Both doors on both sides. So always get in position of mind and volume in set travel. And seen on different angles in travel communications, all through flux, all through setting, all through operation. Okay? Very powerful stuff. And you always see the inside of what you've already done through this equation. Okay? Inside and outside. See? This is inside. This is inside. This is inside. You already done the inside. Now you're working on the outside. Okay, all through gridding, all through setting travel. You bring it in close, you see the pixelation. Okay? That's where you guys are starting. Lacing line, core center, scenario graph interference. starting with black and white through indication system through particle acceleration. Particle acceleration of separation. Merging in positional levels, energizing screen adaptations of flux. All through pixelation. All right? All through holographic grading and sending travel. Okay? Very powerful stuff, as you see it through a drawing of communication. All right? And again, you're here at the bottom, seeing what you've done through structure of design. That's you, looking at this, what you've done, right? Walking sequence, now you can go inside, in that position, inside travel. Okay, and then position your platforms in inside rotation, outside travel. Okay, so you're here, looking from inside and observing everything in travel communications. All through setting, all through operation. All through flux, all through the location of division. Okay, it helps you decide what you're doing in flux over its communication setting of angles. Now it has set the structure of the digital location system all through travel. Okay, so I think we're going to stop there. So you know exactly how to get into rulers and know exactly how to modify it through letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. Set up the metric meters, the scales, and know exactly how to convert the system. It's not about understanding the structure inside, guys. It's already done. You have to understand the outer structure void. Okay, that's also done too, but it's much harder to understand the outside to identify yourself already inside the system of the sim. So yes, it's extremely detailed in set positions. So I'm just trying to understand how you have to understand all these things. It's already done through its equation. So, but to modify that and to see that what you created through a sim, through a simulator, is very powerful stuff, guys. Very, very powerful stuff. Understand the outer structure, understand the inner structure that's already done through its equation. Okay? That's it. So, setting sequence, no debriefing line course centers. We have a communication coming up into all of us in travel. We're coming into that line centers to its master class. All right? Adios.